And the research that I'm presenting today looks at identity crisis. It goes from the outside the organization to the, uh, uh, although as organizational scholars, the boundaries are not that clear to us any longer. It looks at identity crisis and how collective identity gets constructed through crisis. It focuses on the identity of non-Israeli Jews in the workplace, but it actually begins with a very personal and professional identity crisis, Varda's and mine. As critical scholars of identity in organizations and activists working to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in organizations, and the crisis we experienced, the professional crisis we experienced in the aftermath of October 7th. Among the many ways in which our world shattered that day, and at first, honestly, very low on the list, was the realization that our professional community, the one that puts anti-racism, inclusion, and of marginalized groups at the center of its work, immediately, without hesitation, chose to support mass killing of on an ethnic basis, where when the victims were Israelis. So when we finally were able to get out of the couch, we set out to try and figure out what happened to those organizations and scholars and activists who vouch for anti-racism, and what happened to them that they ended up participating in what we saw as a hate movement, and how it affected the Jews in the workplace. So this paper emerged from our interviews with non-Israeli Jews after October 7th, about their workplace and professional experiences, and the professional experience that we just heard from you in the UK could have been one of those. But quite early on, we have realized that even this framing was oversimplified, because even the notion of Jews was not as simple as it sounded. As Eli, all the names are pseudonym. As Eli, one of our first interviewees, told us, "I've never been a Jew at work. Judaism is important to me." He is a religious Jew. But it was never relevant to my work. And then he spoke about how after October 7th, he realized that he should enact his Judaism. So with this insight in mind, nothing functions. Okay. So with this insight in mind, we this paper rests on 3 building blocks. Looking at becoming, the notion of becoming, the question of how identity is constructed within the workplace. So it's an important notion. It refers to social identity as an ongoing dynamic process of identification, constantly reconstructed through interaction rather than as a fixed, stable state of being. And organization scholars have long recognized that workplaces are sites of identity, work, identity construction, and our question is how crises affect that process, and specifically a Jew in the workplace. So we ask ourselves, what does it mean to be a Jew in the workplace, and how people deal with that, how they develop their Jewish identity in the workplace, the meaning of being a Jew in the workplace, what does it mean in professional terms. And it has quickly become clear that that the treatment of Jews in organization has also become a crisis for DEI itself, especially in the US, but all over the world as well. It's DEI or EDI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, equality, diversity, and inclusion, belonging. There are many more words in that. And as DEI scholars, we were trying to figure out how we got to this place where DEI, as you mentioned, DEI people, it was not a unique case. Even before the 7th, there was a study done by one of the Jewish organizations showing, looking actually at social media statements by DEI people, showing, I think in 2021, that many of them were supporting BDS and anti-Jewish marches and so on and so forth. So it was not a surprise that this is their positions, but we were surprised to realize that this is how they acted in the workplace, and we were trying to figure out why is that. So let's see if it works. I won't talk about methodology, but you can ask about it later on. And I want to start with Dana. And she was telling, she is a university professor, and she said, I didn't even know that other people knew I'm Jewish. I'm queer, I'm progressive, I marched in every anti-racist march around campus. I didn't even know I had relatives in Israel, and I don't have any strict opinions about what's going on there. And still, since October 7th, nobody has entered my office. I was ostracized. Now I have to figure out who I am. Another quote from Jacob, who is an assistant to a Democratic senator. The same day, October 7th, they didn't even wait a day. They removed me from all the work WhatsApp groups. People who I thought were personal friends, who had been to my house for dinners, deleted me. Luckily, I can work from home because I didn't want to return to the office. My Jewishness was never an issue before, but now I had to figure out what being a Jew means. And so Eli, Dana, and Jacob, despite their very different relationships to Judaism and to Israel, all three spoke about the need to rethink what being Jewish meant to them. And Rebecca, who is a university administrator and also a human rights educator, added that shortly after October 7th, she attended a meeting of the human rights program in which she teaches, And I shared with shock two incidents. One in which a Jewish student was attacked by another student, and another in which a Palestinian student was doxxed. Um, the entire discussion focused on the Palestinian student. The case of the Jewish student was completely dismissed, and something that as something that doesn't fall into our domain as human rights professors. And she talked about, and she kind of links it to the question of DEI, and she said, all my life, I supported diversity in everything I did. I worked with students and was constantly engaged with the university DEI efforts. I was completely confident that they would immediately step up to support Jewish students. Instead, not only did they refuse to support the students, but they also suddenly stopped talking to me. I realized that this had gone too far. I never thought I'd say it, but maybe it's all need to be dismantled and started over. So as I mentioned, our interest was in how, or we realized that we're talking about people who've never thought that their being Jewish was relevant to their workplaces. Suddenly they realize that they need to think about the meaning of being a Jew in the workplace, and we were trying to figure out how this process works. And it starts with the external rupture. In our case, it's mostly after October 7th, and then most of them had a personal experience of identity-based harm. So swastikas on their doors was a common, in their doors, or I'm recorded, but actually I think it was at Baruch, one of the other CUNY's campuses, where swastika were kind of in many ways in the restrooms and on students' doors and so on and so forth. And so at first, it's their own experiences, but then, as we saw with Rebecca, other people experiences affected them as well. So even if they were not harmed, they looked at what was happening to others and realized that, okay, we are a collective and we need to do something. And so the experience was reframed as a collective experience, and then they looked at what the organization was doing, was offering them, and one after the other, they realized that the organization does nothing, not only in the context of universities, but in other contexts as well. We have people from high tech, from law firm, and from hospitals and others, and they realized that the organization does nothing despite the DI kind of slogans that they've been promoting, and then they started developing their own personal and collective or more or less organized responses. I want to say, and this spiral, the harm is not a one-time event, but a repeating one. We see it as a spiral thing. I mean, it keeps going, and so on and so forth. I wanted to give you the case of Eddie, who is a well-known professional in his field, and a year into, after October 7th, he was excluded from a professional event, and he complained, and following his complaint, he was harassed and bullied by his colleagues, and he is a very senior person. They stopped talking to him. When he goes into the elevator, they go out. He was basically completely removed, and he started, thinking, okay, I'm a DI person. I've never thought about Jews as part of my DI project. I need to think about it. And so on his professional efforts, he started studying Jews as a protected minority. But also personally, he's gay, he's kind of progressive. What should I do? And he's now here studying Gemara, and in a project that aimed to help people dealing with identity issues. What I want to say is that we have there's media, social media, events that are happening around that offer more and more resources for people to figure out what to do with their Jewish identities at work afterwards. So what happened is, and I think that you've mentioned some of the options. So people started operating within the workplace. So this is John, who's a lawyer in New York, very senior one. He says there were several difficult incidents, including explicit anti-Semitic remarks on the firm's internal network and face-to-face comments. And we were really shocked. We went to HR and demanded that there be DI training against anti-Semitism, and they told us that it's not within their jurisdiction. Come on, we're lawyers, we know jurisdiction. In the end, we forced them to have it and ended up organizing it ourselves. Okay. This is Stephen, and I won't go into, this is his real name, the only one. He started an ERG. ERG are Employees Resources Groups organization, and you can see there that at first he started it as a drinking group. He wanted to go out with friends because at Amazon didn't allow him to send email asking Jews to join him for drinks before so he started an ERG and moved on. So basically, I want to get to that. Why didn't Jews see themselves as a protected class that DI should address, and why didn't DI? Why weren't DI people, available for them? So what I wanted to go into, I don't have time for that, I'm sorry, this is the most important part. What I want to say that especially in the US, DI or the diversity project started around 64 with the civil rights movement. And this is the exact same time where Jews were integrated into society. So they didn't need it. They didn't think about themselves as people who need to be a protected class. What's going on here is that since 2016, with the BDS movement, especially at the point where DI got became this current regime organized around the notion of recognition. This is the exact same time where Jews became, a class that needs to be protected again. But Jews didn't know how to frame themselves in those terms, and the DI project, what I call the DI regime, became very hostile to them. I use the notion, Judith Butler, I'm sure that she won't be happy about it, but her notion of recognizability, the regime that defined who is eligible for protection, and the Jews are kept out, I think the DI regime, not only DI institutions and regulations, but the combination of ideology and practices were central to this regime that blocks the ability of Jews to receive this protection. So, do I have another 2 minutes? Okay, so what I want you to take away is that that I think that this entire conference took Jews for granted. That we are assuming that we're Jews, we need protection, there is anti-Semitism directed at us. I think that we were showing that at least in the context of the workplace, Jewish identity is becoming identity. It requires identity work, and I think that in other conferences that I attended as well, people are now figuring out what being a Jew means to them in the context of the workplace, in the context of their struggle to be recognized and accepted. We also show that DI regime constitutes a major part of the recognizability framework, denying Jews the right for inclusion and belonging. And I want to talk a lot about, or more about, withheld recognition. So we have literature on how DI plays a role in recognition of other groups, and in most cases, DI practices help groups to develop their identities, or there was misrecognition. I think that our case is the first in which DI actively withheld recognition and took part in intentional harm, and Jewish identity work unfolds largely within this institutional logic of the DI. You could see that when they are trying to defend themselves, they use the language of DEI. They develop ERGs that are part of the DEI project to push back, and I'll stop here. Thank you.